Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time.
Probably no real surprise here in terms of the verdict, Ashley, especially after only 3 hours. But as you watch the emotion from Alex Murdaugh as the verdict was read, and then you saw his son Buster react to it as well, what went through your mind?
I wasn't so struck by their reaction. I think if I were found of a double murder, I'd be kind of stunned. But I will say I am shocked at this verdict, Leland. You might not be because the deliberation was only 3 hours, but I lived through OJ, whose deliberation was under 4 hours after 9 months of trial, and that was an acquittal. So even though I heard this early verdict, I still thought they could easily have found him not guilty. It only takes one round around the table, right? That's usually what a jury does when they go back and they start deliberating for the first time. There's no manual. They're never told exactly what to do, but they kind of figure it out on their own. But it sounds to me like they went one round around the table, probably had a unanimous verdict, and then just kind of went over each person's thoughts about that just to make sure that they were clear. But I'm still stunned by this. I have to admit, I thought there was plenty of reasonable doubt. And I thought there was good evidence. Don't get me wrong, but I thought there was a lot of reasonable doubt.
Yeah, I'm often reminded of the admonition to never debate a verdict because you just never know what a jury's going to do, and they are the end-all, be-all say. Once the jury's deliberated and delivered their verdict, that's it. You see the seal of the state of South Carolina. That's the live picture from the courtroom right now. Going back to what Brian talked about the sort of so many tentacles of this case. You've got mystery, you've got the forensics, you've got the family, you've got the finances, you've got this massive fall from grace of the Murdaugh family. Is this one of these cases that goes down in infamy, almost like OJ, that continues to be discussed, that we're going to get even more Netflix specials and Hulu specials and everything else out of?
You know, it's funny you should ask that. One of the things I was thinking about as I was watching Dick Harpootlian throughout this trial was his down-home, Southern, folksy manner, right? And I thought, boy, have I ever seen a lot of trials where juries just eat that up. It's their local homeboy, and they love that, and they feel a kinship to that kind of performance. Creighton Waters wasn't that way. He was more matter of fact. He was kind of brusque. And it makes me wonder if juries are kind of changing. You know, don't feed me a line of, personality. Just give me the goods. Because Creighton Waters gave a lot of goods, right? The only thing I'm shocked about is that he just didn't he had to take a massive leap over the chasm, Leland, of the killing. Why would a guy like this do it, right? Sure, he was there and lied about it and drove fast and his phone was crazy and there was lots of steps and it was a family gun, all that stuff. But again, it was really hard to wrap my head around why a guy who was in love with his wife, even her sister, she's got a dog in the fight, she said so, loving relationship, never had a crossword that anyone could ever suggest with his son or his wife or his family. Why would someone like that just do this? And that's what Creighton Waters did not get over, but apparently this jury made the leap just fine.
What do you make of all of the crimes he admitted to, the millions of dollars in theft? The lying to his friends, to his family, to his law partners, the addiction to drugs and everything else. Brian talked a little bit about trying to redeem the family name in some way by being found not guilty, if he could have been found not guilty of these murders. But once you've admitted to that, once you've admitted to taking advantage of this community that you had such huge power in, we're waiting just so you understand this is where the defense and prosecutors will walk out to if they're going to address the media. So if they speak, we'll obviously bring it to you as it happens. But what do you make now of what happens in this community that has been so hurt by this family, in particular by Alex Murdaugh? And obviously now there's a lot of questions about what else this family did.
Look, I think there'll be a lot of relief. If you scour social media, it's pretty vitriolic towards Alex Murdaugh. Much of it having to do with the kinds of victims that he ripped off, right? You rip off little girls who lost their mom and their brother. You rip off a quadriplegic. You rip off your own housekeeper's kids. I mean, there's a special place in hell for people who are that deceitful and nasty, right? There's almost malice in that, if you ask me. But this is a different case, right? And maybe a lot of people who are on the fence in this community thinking, oh, look, he's a bad guy, he's a thief, he's a drug addict, but he's a thief, but he's not a killer necessarily. I think those people may find solace in the fact that the sentence will be fairly similar. The only thing is that with murder, you're not getting out, right? It's a minimum of 30, probably life. And with the financial crimes, there would have been an opportunity more likely for some kind of an earlier parole. And he's 54 years old, so a 30-year sentence is god darn near life, you know?
Yeah.
I keep thinking there just cannot be another story about the Alex Murdaugh case, right? Nothing there left to draw me in. But just when I thought I was out, along comes Becky Hill to pull me back in the words of Al Pacino. Becky was the court clerk in Alex's trial who got into trouble for warning jurors not to be fooled by Murdaugh's tears on the stand. Alex's lawyer said it should have been a mistrial, but the judge disagreed, and it wasn't. And in the end, those jurors did convict him. But now Alex's lawyers may just have a little more ammo, because court clerk Becky Hill has just been arrested and charged with 3 felonies: perjury, obstruction of justice, and misconduct in office. By the way, she was booted from that office after an ethics investigation determined that she'd misused her position to enrich herself by promoting her book. Murdaugh's attorneys are PO'd, and today they released this statement saying, quote, "We are aware of the charges filed against Becky Hill, and while these developments are serious, they are not surprising. We have long raised our concerns about her conduct during and after the trial, and this arrest further underscores the need to protect the integrity of the judicial process. Every defendant is entitled to a fair and impartial trial, and we look forward to Alex Murdaugh finally getting that fair treatment." So I want to know what that means. Does it mean a new trial? Is this still a possibility, given, Becky's going to need her own jury? Stay tuned, folks.
Of 19-year-old Stephen Smith is no longer just a hit and run to be forgotten. You know about the case because he was a friend of Alex Murdaugh's son, Buster, okay? Buster was his friend. And there are rumors of potential involvement in Stephen Smith's death, but no proof has ever come out. Nobody's even really looked. There's been no substantiation of what happened, and the hit and run finding has always stunk. Buster denies it vehemently, just put out a statement. So for all involved, shouldn't there be an investigation? Doesn't the Smith family deserve that? Doesn't Buster, if he's not connected? Joining me now with a major breakthrough in the case is Stephen Smith's mother, Sandy, and her lawyer, Eric Bland. Thank you both very much for joining. Ms. Smith, I know that this is still very painful, especially the idea that your son did not get his due in terms of people trying to find answers to his death. How are you feeling about it now with the latest information? What do you want to share?
I'm still in shock. I'm elated. Just have a lot of mixed emotions right now. This is what I've been waiting for.
Well, I know it's a mixed blessing because the pain is still real. But Counselor Bland, what is it that has changed Sandy's disposition about her son's legacy?
This is a day that Sandy Smith has been waiting, not only as a mother, but as a South Carolinian. 8 years in the coming, Chris. Today, my partner Ronnie Richter and I received an extraordinary phone call from the chief of SLED, Mark Keel, who told us that it's now the state's official position that Stephen Smith did not die from a highway fatality on July 8, 2015. Chief Keel said that he will join us in our exhumation of Stephen Smith, that we will cooperate together in a de facto partnership with what our experts will uncover and analyze after Stephen is exhumed, but it's a golden day for this mother that her son was not killed on a highway as they indicated in the certificate of death.
And of course, Sandy, you never believed that anyway, but one legal question, one personal question. Counselor Bland, on the legal side, is it true that the state authorities have said to you, no need to exhume the body? We already have what we need to continue this investigation. Is that true, and do you accept that?
Not quite. What they said is it's up to us, and Sandy needs this done. One, she wants to reverse the certificate of death and also the findings of the pathologist who said that it was a highway fatality. This is what she's been fighting for. We think that it may yield other information. The cooperation is going to be there, which is extraordinary, between a private law firm, Blam Richter, and the state of South Carolina. We're going to cooperate with our experts. They're going to be present when we do the exhumation. The state has told us that they're going to dedicate now the manpower that they had from the Murdaugh case over to the Smith case. But most importantly, Chris, Chief Keel told me that they believe that there is a small circle of people that have information and that they believe they can now talk and feel free because the yoke of the Murdaughs as a result of the verdict is now off them. So it was a banner day. Usually you don't get this kind of information from the state. But for them to announce that it's their official position and Chief Keel to say that it's okay for me to come on your show and state that is extraordinary. And, you know, we're just so happy for Sandy, not because, you know, she still has to deal with the grieving loss of her son and the exhumation. But this is what this woman has been screaming at the top of her lungs for 8 years. And people are going to have to start asking questions. Why did certain governmental agencies determine it was a highway fatality and were impervious to new information that the death probably was intentional and was indeed murder?
Well, it's also, Sandy, as you know, this isn't the first time that the state has become aware of this and questions about the situation. What do you feel at this point is the direction of why this happened to your son?
I really don't know why they did what they did. I just knew in my heart that what they were telling me was not true.
Do you have any belief, Sandy, about what happened to your son?
I believe he was beaten to death.
Why and by whom?
That I don't know. That's what I need answers for.
Counselor Bland, is there any working theory?
I think it was a hate crime. I think, you know, Stephen was a very courageous young man to live an openly gay lifestyle in the low country of South Carolina in 2015. And I think it may have had to do something with his lifestyle. I don't have a theory on who did it. I think that once we exhume the body and we work with SLED and maybe we can get some people to talk. Remember, there was a piece of evidence, Chris, that was discovered during the Murdaugh murder investigation, whether it was a phone, text, or it was something from a computer. I think we'll find out, but I do think at the end of the day, it had something to do with Stephen's lifestyle and maybe a boyfriend that he may have had or a relationship that he may have had.
Now, of course, it's no surprise to you guys
despicable.
That there was a lot of intrigue surrounding Alex Murdaugh's son, Buster. He put out a statement, said very supportive things about your family, Sandy, and about your son, denies any connection. His lawyer had this to say about the situation.
There has been no indication, to my knowledge, of any involvement by the Murdaughs in Stephen Smith's death, cover-up. I mean, sure, there was information that Randy Murdaugh, maybe Alex Murdaugh, showed up on an accident scene, but these are personal injury lawyers.
Now, Sandy, that question was in this context. Okay, I understand that we don't know anything that connects Buster Murdaugh to this other than, you know, rumors that were put into a Netflix show. But what about the Murdaughs and their influence in general? Counselor Jim Griffin, who doesn't represent, you know, that aspect of it, but he does have purview over Buster, says it wasn't unusual for the Murdaughs to show up at a crime scene because they were personal injury lawyers. Do you accept that?
Randy Murdaugh was not a personal injury lawyer. He was a workman's comp lawyer.
So what does that mean?
As a matter of fact,
Chris?
he was working the case for my husband at the time.
So why do you think they were at the
Chris?
scene?
I don't know. Looking for something, I guess. I don't know.
Counselor?
Chris, you're a lawyer. You know that it's not ethical to go to an accident scene. You know that it's not ethical to find out about accidents through people. I'm not saying Randy Murdaugh did that, but Randy Murdaugh appears to have gone to the accident scene, and we're just going to have to find out why he showed up and how he showed up and who told him to show up.
Has he ever given any statement on that?
He has, to my knowledge, he has not.
Have you approached him about it ever?
I have not, Chris. I just got involved on Friday, and in 5 days, Ronnie and I have at least gotten the state to commit that this is a murder, which, we're making progress, fast progress. Give me a couple days, Chris.
Of course. Just for the headline, for those of you who may be tuning in right now, Stephen Smith, you've heard that name. Beautiful young man, was found dead. It was ruled somewhat a hit and run, never made sense, very mysterious for several different reasons. The state is now saying it has been judged to be a homicide investigation, meaning someone caused his death. Who and why? They are working with counsel for the Smith family to get answers to those questions. Now, I didn't expect this news, Sandy, so I kept the most important question for last. Usually I would ask this right out of the box. Your son should not be defined, as young as he was a beautiful kid with a big future, by how he left this world.
Absolutely.
What do you want people to know about who he was and what his dreams were?
His dreams was to be a doctor. That was his life dream ever since he was little. And he wanted to own 100,000 cats, but he was so bright and so funny. And I just always remember that beautiful smile and them dimples.
He's a beautiful kid. He's got a beautiful mom, and he's got a family that cares about him in death as much as they did in life. And I know you want answers. We'll cover the story to the end. And I appreciate you being with us tonight, Sandy. Our heart goes out to you for your loss. But hopefully you get some answers, so there'll be some closure in that. Counselor Bland, as you know, our job is to get relevant information out. If we can help, we're a phone call away.
You got it, Chris. Thanks for having us.
All right, Counselor Bland, thank you. Ms. Smith, all the best to you and the family. And thank you for being with us. Congratulations on the news that hopefully you'll get to a place of understanding better what was taken from you and why.
Now, despite the ME initially ruling that he died from a hit and run and labeling the cause of death as undetermined, something the new private team of pathologists say was unfortunate, since no evidence of vehicle debris or skid marks was found on Smith's body. Quote, "We see no evidence to suggest the victim was struck by a vehicle." Now, we have no indication at this point that any of the Murdaughs were involved, and Buster Murdaugh, the oldest and only surviving Murdaugh son, has strongly denied rumors he and Stephen Smith had some sort of romantic relationship. But Sally Smith says she saw Alex and his brother Randy Murdaugh at the scene where Stephen's body was found hours after he'd been killed, and that Randy Murdaugh offered to represent the family pro bono without being asked. So at the least, new questions are fair to ask. Joining us now is Dr. Michelle Dupree, the pathologist who oversaw the second autopsy conducted on Stephen Smith's body. Thank you very much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. I know you are not discussing the results of your review until the report is final, but let's talk about what you can say related to the cause of death, manner of death, etc.
Okay, well, yes, we did do a second autopsy. I did not perform that. However, I was in the autopsy suite and observed everything that was conducted. We were able, very fortunately, able to get everything that we needed to do a full and complete second autopsy. So everything that was done is helping us get closer to the answer of what actually happened.
And are you confident you are going to be able to provide an answer? Again, I know you can't get specific with us on what it may be, but just that you will have an answer on cause of death?
Absolutely. I think that we will definitely have an answer for cause of death. The manner of death, as you know, really is going to depend largely on the investigation. And SLED has definitely stepped up and is handling that, and we are supporting them in any way that we can.
Well, I actually want to play you a piece of sound from Dr. Kenneth Kinsey. He was involved also in the Alex Murdaugh trial. As you know, he's now leading the investigation into Stephen Smith's death. He was on Ashley Banfield's show. This is number 3. Earlier this week, and this is what he has said after 8 years about the evidence.
Well, I don't want to take it the wrong way, but I'm very, very excited about the report coming, and the pathologists were very upbeat and said they had everything they needed to do a proper examination of Mr. Smith. So I didn't hear anything negative about that, and they were, saying that it was very good situation for the Smith family and for the investigation.
Doctor, is that a fair characterization of where you are?
Absolutely, and Kenny and I are working very closely together. This is definitely a team effort, and we're on the same team.
Now, do you have any explanation for why the initial medical examiner said what they said about this being a hit and run, and there also being a sexual assault test being done, et cetera?
Well, 2 questions. One, the sexual assault exam is often done when we find suspicious or circumstances like this on males or females. So that was just being thorough. I think that was very professional to do that. As far as why it was ruled the way it was, we look at the evidence that we have at the time. And as you've mentioned earlier, there was no debris in the road. Typically when you find a hit-and-run motor vehicle accident, you'll find debris from the grill or the mirror or something of that nature, and there was none. In addition, oftentimes when a pedestrian is struck by a vehicle, they are literally knocked out of their shoes. And again, this was not the case. And so looking at that evidence that we had at the time, that is why it was ruled the way that it was. It was left as undetermined, however, which is a benefit to the case, because then as new information is found, it can go forward.
Well, maybe I'm not understanding, but it seems that everything that you said about what they found at the time would indicate it was not a hit and run, right?
Well, again, it depends. It's not a typical hit and run, perhaps, but again, because of the circumstances surrounding that, I'm not surprised that it was ruled a hit and run.
And again, just for clarity, what aspect of it makes you not surprised that they declared it a hit and run?
Well, again, looking at the scene, looking at the evidence, there was no other evidence at the time to suggest anything else. For example, there were no stab wounds. There was not a gunshot wound.
Right.
It was blunt force trauma, which could be caused from many different things.
Joining me now is Jordan Jinks. Jordan is a lifelong really, friend of Alex Murdaugh, who was fleeced out of $150,000. And he, as you saw earlier, spoke in the courtroom today. Mr. Jinks, thank you for being on. I'm so sorry that you were a victim of your old friend. I'm so sorry you've had to live through all of this. Obviously, even losing the Murdaugh family members who were murdered has got to be painful because you were close to them. Tell me how you made it through this today. What were your feelings and thoughts as you were able to face him and tell him what you wanted to say?
Thank you, Ms. Banfield, for having me. I didn't clearly get what I wanted to say over because I got kind of emotional. But I'm still in shock, still in disbelief that he did it to me personally, because of the background that we have. I mean, we shared some intimate things. When I say intimate, I want everyone to understand. I mean, we shared some personal things that we probably wouldn't have shared with anybody else that wasn't family, blood. But I grew up without a brother, and I made that bond with him, and I felt like he was that brother I never had.
Well, it's got to be just, you know, doubly heartbreaking then to have to face him and say these things. What I found incredible about you, Mr. Jenks, is that you originally believed Alex was innocent of the murders of Maggie and Paul, and that things changed for you today. Tell me about that.
I felt like this in the beginning because I really know him. When I say I know Alex, I'm not his wife, I'm not his blood brother, but I shared some moments with him that I always had a feeling that he was a loving, caring person to Maggie, Paul, and Buster. I didn't want to believe that he would harm either one of the three. But after hearing him being so vicious and heartless about money and taking money from victims that died and left their families with what was coming to them, and he just took it without a thought. It took all of it. It just made me feel different about him.
Yeah, it makes you see into a man's soul and see differently. Have you, by the way, had a chance to talk with Buster, his surviving son? Have you had a chance to reach out to him at all?
I have not. I'm sure you've been on top of every case and every court hearing there was. If you notice, I wasn't there at either court hearings because I didn't want to deal with it. I wanted to wait until this moment that I could actually speak to Alex. So I didn't want to speak to Buster or anyone else about it. I needed to speak to him. So no, I have not.
Do you plan to in the future?
Speak to Buster?
Yeah.
The question is, do I plan to speak to Buster? I will.
Correct.
I mean, it's not on my list to find him to speak to him, but if I cross him, I would ask for a conversation. I would engage.
Mr. Jenks, again, I am sorry that you have been... Right, exactly. I mean, I'm sorry that you've had to go through all this and that you lost not only your lifelong friend, the family members who were friends with you as well, but then all of just the thievery, your personal losses that you've gone through. I pray for you and the other victims, and I'm so thankful that you were here to share this with us. Thank you, Mr. Jenks.
These rumors about a possible relationship with Buster come from? Was it friends of Buster's? Was it friends of Stephen Smith's? Joining me now is Anjanette Levy, correspondent and host for Law and Crime Network. Thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it. All right, so where did these rumors come from? Who's the one suggesting this?
Well, Dan, thanks for having me. And the rumors really started back in 2015. People went to Sandy Smith, Stephen's mother, and said, hey, I heard that Buster and Stephen were in a relationship and that Buster was trying to keep this under wraps. And it seemed to spread like wildfire. Hampton, South Carolina is a town that has about 2,700 people in it. You know how things can go in a small town. Buster and Stephen also went to high school together. If you think back and look at the timeline here, They would have just graduated high school in the last year or so when Stephen was killed. They were also on the same baseball team. And it's my understanding, Dan, that Randy Murdaugh, the uncle of Buster Murdaugh, was actually their baseball coach. And he also represented the father of Stephen Smith in a workers' comp claim. So we've got a small town here, and rumors spread like wildfire. Sandy Smith wrote a letter to the FBI back in 2016 saying, this is what people are telling me. They come up to me and say these things, and things just unfolded from there. And as you mentioned, Stephen's name, or Buster's name rather, is mentioned along with the Murdaugh name several times in the investigative case file because the state troopers were looking into those rumors.
Now, Buster Murdaugh doesn't have any obligation to deny a relationship with Stephen Smith. He has denied that he was in any way involved in the murder of Stephen Smith, but he has not, has he, addressed any of these rumors about a possible relationship with him?
He did say there were vicious rumors being spread about him and that they were all false. And then he later on admitted, or in the statement, denied unequivocally any involvement in Stephen's death. So he talked about vicious rumors. So I kind of, that led me to believe he was also addressing this whole thing about him having some type of relationship, some type of sexual relationship with Stephen Smith.
I want to play a piece of sound. This is, again, Jim Griffin, the attorney for Alex Murdaugh, on Chris Cuomo's show, talking about why Buster Murdaugh decided to come out and deny any involvement.
The situation that Buster found himself in was the longer he stayed quiet, the more this story got legs. And he struggled over time as to whether coming out and denying the obvious that he had no involvement in Stephen Smith's death would just give oxygen to the flames of the story. From this point forward, anyone who's reporting and putting Buster's picture adjacent to Stephen Smith's face when there's stories of exhuming his body is doing it at their own peril because it's clearly defamatory.
Well, it's definitely defamatory if someone is suggesting that he was involved in the murder, but it is a fact, is it not, that the reason, and this is the important point here, the reason that this link was made at all is because we now know this letter that you mentioned, right? That was actually written by Stephen Smith's mother in 2016?
Well, that's not the only reason we know about it. She wrote this letter to the FBI because she felt like her son had been murdered and that it wasn't being taken seriously by some authorities. Obviously, troopers with the South Carolina Highway Patrol believed Stephen Smith was murdered. If you look in the investigative file, Dan, that night when they discovered his body in the road, they believed he had been shot in the head. The case notes say they believed this was a homicide. Then the pathologist who performed the autopsy hours later said, no, it's a vehicular hit and run. Well, nobody bought that, not even the county coroner. But the rumors really started because people in town were saying this and then went to Sandy Smith. And then investigators were also getting that same information. So there are all these recordings in the case file where people talk about this rumor. And those recordings are actually featured in the Netflix documentary.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, look, again, just because people were saying it doesn't mean that it's true. And we will continue to follow this. Anjanette Levy, thank you. Appreciate it.
Tens of thousands of dollars were made off items that were sold from the Alex Murdaugh estate, Moselle. Many items like furniture, art, even clothing sold way above ask. Man, what a fascination, huh? The question is, who gets the money from the auction? There are a lot of victims of Alex Murdaugh, right? Remember all the financial crimes? And the Murdaugh family themselves. Let's ask the attorney representing Murdaugh's victims, Eric Bland. Thank you very much. First, I just want to play price tag with some people here. What kind of antlers go for 10 grand? Or you think that's just a novelty thing because there's something that he may have killed?
Oh, it's ridiculous, Chris. You know, Alex trying to now grab some of these surplus proceeds and putting a motion in to say that he's entitled to more money from his IRA because it's legitimate money and he needs them for his court costs, whereas attorneys spent $20,000 a week for their lodging during the trial, where the state spent $125 a night. Remember, if his IRA money is legitimate, that means he's living on ill-gotten gains. Remember, he stole $8 million over 12 years that he was living on. It would be like a bank robber, Chris, going and robbing a bank and then living on those proceeds and still working their normal W-2 job and then saying, well, I get to keep all the money that I saved in my IRA and my 401k because that was legitimate money. It's not. The chutzpah of this guy, Chris, is beyond anything I've ever seen.
But Eric, I can't believe you're surprised. The guy was just convicted of killing his wife and his son. The idea that he tried to get a little bit more money out of his 401k should not be a shocker. What's a little bit of a shocker is, though, that his brother is trying to get a couple of $100,000 at least for legal expenses. Don't you think that just under the category of doing the right thing, you would not want to touch this pool of money to try to make amends with as many as the people that your brother hurt as possible?
Again, it defies credulity. Originally, he had $32,000 of costs, which were approved by the court. But now all of a sudden, Alex wants more money. You know, people paid way more than fair market value. The assets actually are owned by a receiver at this point in time. None of the things that were sold, none of these Mizelle proceeds, they're owned by a receiver who was appointed by the court to marshal all of the assets for Alex's victim. His son, Buster, got $650,000 as a 26-year-old kid. That's a pretty good start. He doesn't need any more money than that. He can go get a job. He had the opportunity to be in law school, Chris, and he was expelled for alleged plagiarism. He had the opportunity to go back in, Chris, and chose not to. As my father used to say, get a job.
Well, let's give him his due. We understand that Buster waived his right to the inheritance of over $530,000. If that's true, he's pretty much the only one doing the right thing here.
Well, yeah, I mean, but he is getting $650,000 from the combined proceeds of the sale of his property, and there's a real argument that Mallory Beach,
isn't that
she
the
has
inheritance
not been
that he's? But isn't that the inheritance that he's waiving?
Well, yes, he is waiving that, but he's also doing that because his father's got Slayer statute issues where he can't profit on it. Remember, I hold a $4.3 million judgment for my clients, the Satterfields. They are a judgment creditor. The IRS, the South Carolina Department of Revenue, are judgment creditors to get at this money. The argument is, Chris, he lived on stolen money. If Alex will come into court, Chris, here's the deal. If Alex comes into court and says, here's where the $8 million went, and he will be open and honest with the court about where that money went over the last 12 years, then maybe there could be a discussion. But you can't be totally silent about where all the stolen money went and say, well, I get to get the 401k and the IRA money because it's statutorily protected.
Well, that juror that you played the soundbite from, she was one of the first ones this morning, and you said it, I mean, she said it outright, like there were no ifs, ands, or buts. She said that she felt pressured by Clerk Becky, and that one of the reasons she had the guilty verdict, that she agreed on guilty, is because of Clerk Becky, which was jaw-dropping. And at the end of the day, also interesting, by the way, the judge gave a ruling at the end of the day. Like, when does that ever happen? She took like a 10-minute recess and came back and made her decision. We were expecting a written ruling, but you see the judge there. She tore Clerk Becky apart, Ashley. For the first 10 minutes of her speech that she gave at the end of the day, she basically said Clerk Becky's a liar. I think she lied on the stand today. All she cares about is money and fame, and she took advantage of the whole situation just for herself. So she's not a fan of Clerk Becky. But then at the end of all of that, she said, I don't think this all rises to the level of a new trial. I think it would have been guilty regardless. And she decided that Murdaugh wasn't going to get a new trial based on this.
This is nuts. How about that whole business in the jury room where they're just, sitting back and watching the live stream of what's going on in the courtroom where they are not supposed to be because they are not supposed to hear what their fellow jurors are saying? Did anybody acknowledge that that was now part of this mess? Did it factor in at all? Might it factor in maybe on an appeal of this decision?
I think so, and it was crazy because the judge was trying to keep things moving along, and all of a sudden the bailiff walks up to the judge, and we're like, what's going on? And then the judge says, okay, we're going to take a break, goes into the back, comes out, looks extremely agitated, and says, I can't believe this, but the bailiff spotted the jurors in the jury room streaming the trial, which is obviously not supposed to be happening. She says the cell phones should have been taken away. They weren't taken away. And so then she had to call the jurors in and question them about that, where they admitted that it was up. Some of them were streaming it, others were listening. And you know, I mean, this is clearly going to be part of a bigger appeal later.
You think? I mean, what is wrong with that courthouse? What a series of, like, unfortunate clown shows, you know? Okay, so thank you for having to bear all of that, and thank you for bringing it to us, Brian.
And joining us this morning to talk more about the latest cases against the former attorney and how this all could play out, former FBI Special Agent Stuart Kaplan. As always, thank you. So he's been relocated. He's now at McCormick. It's in Georgia, at the Georgia-South Carolina border. Reason for this type of move? Why would they do this?
And good morning to you, Marty. Most correctional facilities are not set up or designed to house prisoners permanently in protective custody. This facility, McCormick, does have a separate unit where it can house up to 25 prisoners specifically identified as necessary to keep them basically on lockdown in protective custody. And that is why they moved him for trying to ensure his safety.
And why is he considered an inmate that would need protective custody? I mean, obviously it's a high-profile case, but what else about it would make him a target in prison that he would need to be confined?
Well, interesting enough, Marnie, it's ironic because I'm not so sure that the threat is really with respect to someone maybe wanting to act out or some sort of revenge against Alex Murdaugh. I think the judicial system, the correctional system, is very concerned about the liability issue. We have seen all too often, more recently in the last couple of years. I think the most notoriety, most publicized one was that of Jeffrey Epstein. I think the people that are in charge of these correctional facilities are concerned about his safety and don't want to be worried about that something will happen on their watch. And so the easier way, the path of less resistance, is to take someone like Alex Murdaugh and keep him on lockdown in protective custody. This will, it's not a guarantee, we will certainly add another layer of security just to protect his personal safety.
So that he does not harm himself. We know the murder for hire plot came out in the trial. His attorneys are going to appeal his double murder conviction and his consecutive life sentences. On what grounds will they do so?
Well, I think obviously there is a big issue with respect to some of the evidence that was introduced at trial. There were several arguments with respect to either there was a violation of the Fourth Amendment with respect to that what was recovered at the scene was a violation of his constitutionally protected right, or that there were issues with respect to things that were overruled at pretrial that then put Alex Murdaugh in a prejudicial state with respect to going forward and the continuation of what they thought was tainted evidence being used and incorporated into the trial. I think the most damning thing was where they were unsuccessful, meaning the defense team was unsuccessful, is you recall they paraded in one witness after the other with respect to talking about his theft, his fraud with respect to what went on in the law firm. I think obviously there was an argument with respect to the relevancy of the introduction of that evidence and obviously the prejudicial effect that it had on Alex Murdaugh. And I think that's going to be probably one of the highlighted issues on appeal.
And based on all of that, same judge that presided over the case, what's the likelihood any of these appeals would be granted?
I think slim to none. I think that the appellate courts will realize that the evidence was overwhelming in favor with respect to his guilt. And I think that there was nothing done that would have risen to the level of, quote unquote, being reversible error. And so I think that the conviction will be upheld on appeal.
Mentioned this a moment ago, Stuart. There are questions as to whether Murdaugh can even afford any of these appeals. His attorneys have asked for money to be transferred out of the escrow account in connection to the Mallory Beach trial. If that doesn't happen, if they don't get the money, he gets a public defender. How does that move forward?
Yeah, so Alex Murdaugh would then petition the court. He would be required to fill out a financial affidavit, which is done routinely based upon the court's finding and them being satisfied that he does not have the minimal assets to be able to afford a lawyer to perfect his appeal. He would then be appointed a public defender to then file the appeal on his behalf. So if his financial state is zero, he will not be left without representation. He will get a public defender at the taxpayer's cost.